March 17, 1941. 3:47 hours. The North Atlantic, roughly 40 miles northeast of Ireland. Commander Donald McIntyre grips the bridge railing of HMS Walker, his breath visible in the icy air as massive waves crash against the hull. Below, a convoy of 41 merchant ships battles through towering swells, carrying vital supplies that could mean the difference between survival and defeat for Britain: food rations, fuel reserves, munitions, and raw materials. Unseen in the inky blackness, a pack of at least 5 German U-boats shadows them, poised to strike. What McIntyre doesn't realize, and what High Command back in London couldn't foresee, is that in the next few hours, 2 of Germany's most accomplished submarine commanders will see their vessels neutralized through tactics the Royal Navy had strictly prohibited. One will be forced to surface amid leaking fuel, her crew emerging with signals of surrender. The other will meet a similar fate in a coordinated maneuver that defies every rule in the book. But we're jumping ahead. The numbers alone tell a tale of a nation on the brink. In 1940, German U-boats claimed 471 Allied ships, totaling over 2.5 million tons of cargo lost to the depths. Month after month, these predators outpaced Britain's ability to replace what was sunk, with projections showing food stocks dwindling to critical levels by the end of 1941. Simple arithmetic painted a grim picture. Without a turnaround, Britain faced collapse from within. The Royal Navy's primary countermeasure was the depth charge, cylindrical explosives packed with 300 pounds of TNT, deployed from the stern of destroyers and set to detonate at predetermined depths. Yet, official records showed a dismal success rate of just 3%. For every 100 attacks, only 3 resulted in a confirmed U-boat elimination. This figure would soon become the pivot point for a dramatic shift in the war at sea. Within the Admiralty's anti-submarine warfare division, senior officers pored over the data and concluded the depth charge was performing as expected. They argued that further enhancements would require groundbreaking new technologies, not tweaks to existing ones. Doctrine was set in stone: standardized patterns, fixed settings, no deviations allowed. But in a modest cabin on HMS Stork, a junior officer without formal scientific credentials or high-level backing scribbled page after page of notes that challenged this consensus. Lieutenant Commander Frederick John Walker had witnessed convoys torn apart and supplies vanish beneath the waves. He dared to ask, what if our approach to depth charges is fundamentally flawed? His insights would preserve thousands of lives, nearly derail his own path in the Navy, lead to an outright ban on his ideas, and ultimately require a bold superior to bend regulations and validate what a single determined mind had uncovered. On September 3, 1939, as Britain entered the war, U-30 struck the passenger liner SS Athenia, sending shockwaves through the Allied world and marking the start of what Winston Churchill would describe as the one campaign that truly unnerved him. The depth charge, refined from World War I designs and honed in peacetime exercises, appeared as the ideal response. Equipped with ASTIC sonar, destroyers could detect submerged threats, accelerate toward them, and release charges overhead, calibrated for explosion at the target's likely position. In theory, it was flawless. Reality, however, exposed critical weaknesses in the harsh Atlantic conditions. First, during the high-speed dash to the contact point, ASTIC often lost the signal lock due to the ship's own turbulence and speed, leaving captains to deploy weapons based on outdated estimates. That crucial 30-second window between last detection and release gave U-boats ample time to maneuver away. Second, standard settings targeted 150 and 300 feet, based on older submarine capabilities from the previous war. Modern Type 7 U-boats, however, could plunge to 750 feet. Commanders simply dove deeper upon hearing an approaching destroyer, evading the blasts entirely. Third, the prescribed diamond deployment pattern assumed linear submarine paths, but agile U-boats twisted and turned, rendering the geometry ineffective. These factors combined into a cycle of missed opportunities. From the war's outset to early 1941, Western Approaches Command logged 174 solid U-boat detections but secured only 5 successes, a 2.9% hit rate. Meanwhile, German shipyards churned out new submarines at an alarming pace, achieving a 4-to-1 replacement ratio over Allied sinks. The implications extended far beyond naval battles. Britain relied on 60 million tons of imports yearly to sustain its population and war machine. By March 1941, reserves had shrunk to a mere 6 weeks' worth. Continued losses at this tempo threatened not just military setbacks but widespread shortages that could force negotiations or worse. Churchill recognized the urgency, issuing a directive in March 1941 that prioritized U-boat defeats above all, measuring victory by how many more submarines were lost than built. Efforts ramped up, extended air patrols, refined convoy formations, upgraded radar, and sonar tweaks. Yet the core issue persisted. Attack success hovered at 3 to 5%. Proposals for innovations like forward-firing weapons or smart torpedoes promised relief but demanded years of development and refits that time wouldn't allow. The fleet needed an immediate fix using what was already aboard. Enter Frederick John Walker, a figure who embodied the tension between rigid structure and adaptive thinking in military ranks. In 1941, he was the archetype of an overlooked talent, a lieutenant commander whose advancement had been stymied, ideas brushed aside, and role confined to routine duties. Lacking elite education or specialized labs, he worked from his shipboard quarters, driven by first-hand observations and relentless analysis. Walker's lineage traced back to naval traditions in Plymouth, where he was born on June 3, 1896. Enlisting at 13, he served on cruisers during World War I and earned command by 33. By rights, he should have risen higher by 1940. Instead, his habit of probing established practices, questioning patrol strategies in exercises, critiquing assessments in meetings, earned him a reputation as a disruptor. In 1937, aboard HMS Shropshire in the Far East, he authored a detailed report on convoy defenses that clashed with official policy. The reply was curt, appreciated but outside his remit, no changes forthcoming. By war's declaration, Walker led HMS Stork in convoy escorts, a vital but unglamorous assignment. As peers advanced to larger commands, he documented the frustrations of fruitless hunts. What set him apart was his methodical review of defeats. Post-attack, he'd debrief sonar teams, time sequences, and map probable escapes. He amassed reports from across the fleet, focusing on patterns in both failures and rare wins. By late 1940, his findings crystallized. The 30-second blind spot allowed U-boats to dodge standard patterns, and depths were miscalibrated for current threats. His proposed remedy was straightforward yet radical: divide escorts for better coordination. One vessel tracks at low speed, feeding live data to the attacker for precise drops, not rigid formations. In January 1941, he formally suggested this to command. The rejection was swift. It breached doctrine on multi-ship risks and delays. Undeterred, he refined and resubmitted with data-backed projections. Denied twice more, with warnings against further pursuits. Unbeknownst to Walker, his paper landed with Commander Gilbert Roberts at the Western Approaches Tactical Unit in Liverpool, a covert wargaming hub where models simulated Atlantic scenarios on a vast floor map. Roberts, intrigued by the logic, tested it in 47 mock engagements. Standard tactics yielded 4% success. Walker's approach tripled it to 12%. He presented this to Admiral Sir Percy Noble, head of Western Approaches. Noble's query cut to the core: if effective, why the ban? Roberts explained the bureaucratic hurdle. On February 28, 1941, Noble issued a discreet memo granting escort leaders leeway for tactical experiments, essentially a loophole to innovate quietly. Walker got the note on March 3 and pivoted to testing depth settings first, simpler than full coordination. Calculations showed U-boats crossed shallow zones in that blind window, so he advocated mixing 50-, 100-, and 200-foot detonations to create a layered barrier. On March 8, west of Ireland, HMS Stork applied this to a contact. No full sink, but sonar picked up unusual structural stresses, hints of impact never heard before. Word spread, and backlash followed, an order to halt non-standard practices. This set the stage for a pivotal confrontation on March 15 in Liverpool. Admiral Noble convened Walker, Admiralty officials, experts, and Roberts. The atmosphere was tense, like a tribunal. Captain Reginald Thornton led the interrogation, citing violations of protocol. Walker stood firm, explaining the math: U-boats dove through untargeted depths in 30 seconds, evading blasts. Specialists countered with risks to own ships from shallow charges. Walker rebutted with attack logs showing no self-damage but clear enemy distress. Thornton decried the chaos of individual tweaks undermining fleet unity. Roberts interjected with simulation data projecting a 278% efficiency boost. Debates raged, emotions versus evidence, hierarchy versus results. Walker offered a trial, 6 months to prove it in combat, staking his career. Thornton called it manipulative. Walker countered with the human cost, thousands lost monthly to flawed methods. Noble silenced the room and ruled, Walker could proceed with monitoring, if no gains in 6 months, discontinuation and discipline. If successful, broader adoption. He warned Walker against failure. That tense decision in Liverpool hung in the air like Atlantic fog, but it gave Frederick Walker the narrow window he needed. 6 months to prove his theories in the crucible of real combat, with his career on the line. Back at sea, the night of March 17, 1941 unfolded exactly as the opening moments suggested. HMS Walker and her sister ship HMS Vanek had been locked in a grueling hunt with U-99, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Otto Kretschmer, the highest-scoring U-boat ace of the war up to that point. 44 merchant ships lay at the bottom of the ocean because of him. For 3 exhausting hours, the destroyers maintained contact, launched standard attacks, and watched the submarine slip away each time. Commander Donald McIntyre, desperate and aware of whispers about Walker's forbidden methods reaching the escort groups, made a decisive call. He ordered Vanek to hold a wide, slow circle to keep steady ASTIC contact and relay constant position updates by radio. Walker, accelerating only at the final moment, would deliver the charges using the new variable depth settings, 40% at 50 feet, 40% at 100 feet, and 20% at 200 feet, to trap the U-boat in its crash dive path. At 300 yards, the pattern was released. The sea erupted in a staggered series of detonations, not the usual distant thumps but close, overlapping shocks. Almost immediately, thick black oil bubbled to the surface, followed by debris. Then, astonishingly, U-99 herself broached at a sharp angle, water pouring from her decks as her crew scrambled up the conning tower, hands raised in surrender. Kretschmer's recovered war diary later confirmed the shock. The charges had exploded at multiple levels simultaneously, fracturing the pressure hull forward and causing uncontrollable flooding. He had never encountered British tactics like this before. Less than an hour later, the same coordinated approach and depth settings were used against U-100, commanded by Joachim Schepke, Germany's second-highest ace. The pattern struck true again. U-100 surfaced violently, damaged beyond control. In the darkness and confusion, Vanek closed its speed and rammed the submarine amidships, slicing her in two. Schepke was killed in the collision. In a single night, using tactics explicitly banned by the Admiralty just days earlier, 2 of the Kriegsmarine's deadliest commanders were removed from the war. News of the double success reached Western Approach's command within 48 hours. The formal prohibition on Walker's modifications vanished quietly. No public reversal, no admission of error, just a subtle lifting of restrictions. From April onward, Walker and a growing circle of escort commanders began applying and refining the methods in earnest. Walker was relentless. After every engagement, he gathered sonar recordings, crew observations, and timing data. He calculated blast radii, pressure wave overlaps, and the exact dive profiles U-boats followed under attack. His notebooks grew thicker with equations showing how shallower settings increased lethal probability without endangering the attacking destroyer. By May 1941, HMS Rochester, operating under Walker's guidance, forced U-47, the famous boat commanded by Gunther Preen, scorer of the audacious Scapa Flow attack, to surface damaged and sink under concentrated fire. It was the first outright kill directly attributed to the new settings. In June, another escort using standard doctrine failed against 3 separate contacts. Frustrated, the captain switched to Walker's variable depths for a 4th U-boat. The submarine surfaced with catastrophic flooding and was finished off, a confirmed success that convinced skeptics in the fleet. By July 1941, Western Approaches issued Tactical Memorandum 114, authorizing all escort commanders to employ variable depth charge settings as the tactical situation warrants. The Admiralty in London never formally endorsed the change, they simply stopped opposing it. The numbers, however, spoke unmistakably. In 1940, Royal Navy escorts conducted 334 depth charge attacks for 11 confirmed kills, a 3.3% success rate. In the first 3 months of 1941, before widespread adoption, 147 attacks yielded only 5 kills, 3.4%. From April through December 1941, after Walker's method spread, 289 attacks produced 22 kills, a 7.6% rate, more than double the previous figure. But Walker was already looking beyond depth settings. He recognized that even improved patterns could be evaded if the U-boat heard the attacking destroyer approaching at high speed. The solution required true coordination, one ship holding distant, quiet, astic contact while a second crept in almost silently, guided by radio directions, to drop charges directly overhead before the submarine realized danger was close. He called it the creeping attack. It demanded perfect trust between captains, precise timing, and nerves of steel from the slow-approaching ship gliding through darkness with engines barely turning. Walker drilled his crews endlessly in port and tested the concept whenever opportunity arose. The first operational success came on June 24, 1943, in the Bay of Biscay. Walker's second support group, now sailing under his direct command as a captain aboard HMS Starling, detected U-119. The submarine crash-dived and began radical maneuvers, confident it could outrun a standard charge run. HMS Kite held steady contact at range while Starling crept forward at minimum speed, silent as a ghost. Guided only by whispered radio bearings, Starling reached release point and dropped a perfectly placed pattern. A massive underwater explosion followed immediately. Debris, clothing, wood fragments, and a heavy oil slick spread across 400 yards of sea. U-119 was obliterated, the creeping attack's battlefield debut. Over the next 11 months, Walker's group sank 6 more U-boats using refined versions of the tactic. Other escort groups studied his reports and adopted the method. By early 1944, creeping attacks, variable depth settings, and coordinated tracking became standard across the fleet. The German reaction was slow at first, then increasingly alarmed. Grand Admiral Karl Donitz's war diary in May 1943 noted that recent losses suggested Allied depth charge tactics had evolved significantly, with charges detonating at multiple depths and clear evidence of intership coordination beyond anything previously modeled. By July, an urgent signal went to all U-boats at sea. Conventional crash dives were no longer reliable. Upon detection, commanders were to plunge immediately to maximum depth and maintain silent running for at least 45 minutes. The shift cost the U-boats their greatest advantage, agile evasion in mid-depths where they could still maneuver and prepare counterattacks. Forced deeper, they lost speed, battery life, and offensive positioning. The hunter had become the hunted more often than not. On March 15, 1944, Walker's second support group escorted Convoy HX-280 through a wolf pack assault. Over 36 intense hours, they prosecuted 19 separate U-boat contacts, sinking 2 outright and severely damaging a third that was forced to abort. Not one merchant ship was lost. The Convoy Commodore's report praised Walker's skill and determination, declaring his methods the most significant advance in anti-submarine warfare since ASTIC itself. Across his career, ships under Walker's direct command accounted for 20 confirmed U-boat kills, an unmatched record. Fleet-wide, an estimated 147 sinkings between 1941 and 1945 traced their success to tactics he pioneered. Historians calculate that these improvements saved between 10,000 and 15,000 merchant seamen's lives, along with hundreds of irreplaceable ships and millions of tons of cargo that kept Britain fighting. Yet the cost to Walker himself was immense. He drove himself without pause, spending 18 months almost continuously at sea, personally overseeing every hunt, every drill, every refinement. Crew members later recalled how he seemed possessed, as though waging a private war against every U-boat in the ocean. On July 9, 1944, back in Liverpool Naval Hospital, Captain Frederick John Walker died at age 48 from a cerebral thrombosis, a stroke brought on by sheer exhaustion. His funeral drew thousands to the streets of Liverpool. His crew carried his casket. Winston Churchill sent a personal message hailing him as one of the outstanding commanders of the Battle of the Atlantic, with a record of U-boat destructions unequaled. But in life, Walker received no knighthood, no promotion to admiral, no command larger than an escort group. Naval historians point to a quiet truth. The Admiralty gratefully used his revolutionary tactics but could not fully forgive the junior officer who had proven their doctrine dangerously wrong. Lieutenant Commander Peter Gretton, who served alongside him, put it plainly: Johnny Walker saw what needed doing and did it, regardless of what the rulebook said. That made him a hero to every sailor who came home, and a perpetual problem to the administrators. By mid-1944, Walker's methods were codified in the Royal Navy's anti-submarine manual as standard procedure. Sailors simply called it Walker's Way. May 1943 became known as Black May for the Kriegsmarine, with 41 U-boats lost, the highest monthly toll of the war. Dönitz withdrew his fleet from the North Atlantic convoy routes, effectively ending the immediate threat to Britain's lifeline. The principles Walker forged under fire, coordinated multi-ship tracking, variable depth weapons, and deliberate silent approaches, remain foundational in modern anti-submarine warfare. From helicopter-dropped torpedoes to advanced sonar networks, his insights echo in training halls from the U.S. Naval War College to NATO exercises today. Frederick Walker never sought credit. He wrote no memoirs, gave no lectures, and asked for no recognition beyond the chance to save lives. He saw a broken system, calculated a better way, and fought to implement it against every obstacle the bureaucracy could muster. Because of one determined officer who refused to accept defeat as inevitable, 10,000 sailors returned home to their families, and Britain endured long enough to see victory. His gravestone in Liverpool bears an inscription chosen by the men who served with him: Captain F.J. Walker, C.B., DSO, and 3 bars. He was the best of us.